Good morning, everyone. My name is Grant Irons. I'm your room host. Welcome to Staff Retainment Beyond Salary, Steps to Skill, Empower, and Be an Employer of Choice. The emergency exits, are in the back if there is an emergency. Restrooms are to the back and left, and please silence your phones. The session is being recorded. Elizabeth?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us first thing in the morning. I'm excited to start off our second day of the Washington, D.C. Public Sector Summit. My name is Elizabeth Boudreau. I'm an executive advisor for healthcare here at Amazon Web Services in the nonprofit and public sector space. Today we're going to talk about something that I think involves a lot of us in public sector, regardless if we're a nonprofit, if we're in government or defense, and that's around our staff. How do we skill them, empower them, and make sure they want to stay with us? I'm very excited today to have Ken Iser with me, as well as Jeff Olson, to tell their stories of what Amazon's doing to help with this, as well as what we see with some of our customers. Go ahead.
Thank you. Great to see you all today. We're going to start off by talking about, I'll give you an idea of what we're doing with AWS Educate, a program that's really devoted for students, and then turn it over to Jeff, who's going to dive into internal staff. But I think what I talk about is ideally applicable across the board. So right now, to kind of set up the need case around this, we're in the midst of what we call this fourth industrial revolution. It's driven by the cloud and advanced services like IoT, robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on. Some of this has been driven by the great accessibility, reduced cost of storage and database usage of big data that's enabling this, as well as all the services that customers are driving AWS and doing themselves that lay on top of the cloud. This is creating a dramatic growth opportunity in the cloud. AWS was the fastest IT vendor to ever hit a $10 billion yearly run rate, and that was just a few years ago. Now, again, about 3 years later, the company is at a $31 billion yearly run rate and still growing at a startup-like clip of 42% year over year, creating an enormous opportunity and millions of jobs inside the cloud. To drive this point home, cloud computing has been the #1 LinkedIn skill for the past 4 years in a row. Now, the way we look at cloud computing, I'm going to divide this into job families. So cloud computing includes software development, which has certain job titles like DevOps, web development engineer, mobile application developer, and so on. Second family is cloud architecture, designing for scalable, resilient architecture inside the cloud. The third is the data family, a giant and growing family, including the data sciences, machine learning, artificial intelligence, business intelligence and analytics, and so on. And then lastly, some of those middle skill opportunities, like in operations, the cloud support engineer, technical cloud support associate, and even cybersecurity, which can range all the way from middle skill all the way to PhD. These jobs also pay a lot of money. The average pay for an AWS certified, for somebody with an AWS certification ranges, and this is a study actually that goes back a couple years, so we've also seen increases from this. For the entry level, associate level professional certification, the associate level certification ranges anywhere from $108,000 to $138,000. This does not mean that everybody has to have an AWS certification in order to get into the job, but it certainly helps and it bolsters both their ability and their income in the cloud. So what's the problem? Giant opportunity. We can't come close to filling the demand for these jobs. This was a pinnacle study for me. Glassdoor ran a study of companies over their platform between the years of 2009, 2015. They found that the time to hire increased by 80%. Just think about that. a near doubling of the time to hire. Think about the lost innovation. AWS, one of the pride of the thing that we do is we move fast, we think big, and we innovate. But we can't innovate without builders, without innovators to do that. Think about the excess cost to all of your organizations in terms of recruiting. And think about this giant lost opportunity for people who are left out of all these jobs. Actually, I was looking at a Wall Street Journal article, I think one came out just a couple days ago, talking about how we are at this giant, we are at the largest gap between open jobs and available employees to get it. We have way more jobs than people can fill. There is absolutely a shift towards higher skilled, less routine positions requiring judgment and technical skills. This was by the chief economist at Glassdoor at the time. Anybody who says that you're not going to hire skilled just doesn't know their research. We have been shifting that way. Now, will some jobs get automated out? Absolutely. Jobs that don't require skills, jobs that are undifferentiated, are absolutely the most likely to get moved out. But opportunities for higher skilled jobs abound in this marketplace. Middle skill to high skill job opportunities absolutely abound. The notion of requiring judgment is absolutely one of those key assets. Critical decision-making skills, collaboration. But there are also what we call born in the cloud competencies. We push them back to Amazon leadership principles. Think big, bias for action. Invent and simplify. From my perspective, I think that education prepares people to invent and simplify, to iterate after failure, when for years we teach them to march towards terminal exams, towards terminal degrees, and a terminal end to education. It's been failure is bad in education, and we need to teach people to fail. Do we teach people in education? Do we teach people before they come to our company to operate at the pace of the cloud, to show bias for action, and to think big? When people come into my organization, I constantly will tell them, if you come to Amazon, you're going to have to move faster than you've ever moved before. We have to be comfortable with failure. We have to be comfortable walking into two-way doors, having reversible decisions, but moving fast. And are we really teaching people to think big? Ambiguity. The other thing people ask me in an interview constantly is, what is your average day like? For me, that's a little bit of a demerit in an interview. I don't think they've studied Amazon. You have new things, new rocks come onto your plate every single day. And if you can't adjust to those rocks, if you can't deal without your structure and your process. Jeff Bezos talked, I think, in a share letter, I think it was last year, about day two company being process as a proxy. If you are process driven, you're not going to operate well at a company like Amazon. We need you to think fast, to move on your feet, and be able to deal with big rocks as they come in. So what is Amazon doing to address this skills gap? We have a host of programs. Amazon Future Engineer is a great program that prepares people. It's meant to complement computer science education in K-12, largely for underserved students, and prepare them with computer science skills. AWS Academy, it's a sister program to ours. They have over 800, I think it's 880 institutions that are using their program to provide end-to-end curricula that prepares people for certification. We Power Tech, AWS and ideally Amazon-wide program that casts the need for diversity, for inclusion, women, underserved minorities in technology positions. We all have places to go. All of our companies have places to go, advances to make in terms of bringing in inclusion into our workforce, and it's absolutely a priority of ours. The Military Apprenticeship Program. It began at Northern Virginia Community College just a couple years back, where we took military military veterans and put them into an apprenticeship program. The success of that program led to scaling in Dallas, Oregon, and several other locations. And the Amazon Career Choice Program, really a revolutionary program that looked upon our employees in fulfillment centers, our hourly employees, and say, we want to upskill you into different occupations. And those occupations may exist outside of Amazon, such as in healthcare and financial, and increasingly into technical fields. And then there's AWS Educate, the program I run. Whether it's going after students or into your internal workforce, here are some of the basic value propositions about what AWS Educate does. We launched in May of 2015 specifically to address this growing need while also enabling it to be symbiotic to education. First thing is open course content. We believe that the content that people are teaching, whether it's inside educations and eventually inside all of your companies, does not keep pace with the cloud. It's very tough. We come out with new things around machine learning modeling, like SageMaker last year, and then pushed in SageMaker RL around reinforcement learning and Deep Racer to help you adjust your models and also gamify that entire machine learning experience. AWS rolled out, I think, over five new features on average every single day of last year. We don't expect that to get into learning, whether it's education or workforce, but there's some key stuff that needs to be there. Professional development, helping teachers and faculty adjust to this growing need for cloud learning. Communities of collaboration. For our side, we introduced the AWS Educate Cloud Ambassador Program to reward and recognize faculty who are doing awesome things inside the classroom and work to make them evangelists. Grants for free access into AWS. All of us need people with practical work experience. When we look at education, does that really give the hands-on learning experience, or is it more about theoretical? We need people with hands-on experience entering into AWS. We issued micro-credentials, is again something I'll show you, and then we have a job board. This job board is of Amazon customer and partner jobs, and we're getting tons of jobs from various companies who are in that AWS ecosystem onto our job board. A couple years back, we launched the AWS Educate Career Pathways. What these are is we looked at the most in-demand jobs. At the time it was 28. We narrowed it down to 11 after getting feedback from our customers to simplify. What were the 28 most in-demand jobs? And then we worked with Amazon customers, partners, and third parties to define what are the level 1 through 3 knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to attain all of those jobs. That composes what we call our cloud competency framework, and we march all of our content, all of our learning, our assessments, our projects based on the end goal of finding a job. For students, there is no more important thing than finding a career. Yes, we want them to be enlightened. Yes, we want them to be contributors of society, but they absolutely and definitively need a career after they graduate. So we've seen mass demand for our program, over 2,400 educational institutions in over 200 countries and territories around the world. All of the top 10 leading global computer science and information systems organizations have joined, like Carnegie Mellon, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and so on. But we also saw mass demand coming out of vocational and trade schools around the world, showcasing that demand of institutions who were directly focused in on providing pathways into companies. Hundreds of thousands of students and over 10,000 educators. Lastly, before I turn it over to Jeff, we launched a cloud degree program. What that really is pathways from K-12 to community college to 4-year degree and to master degree programs But in essence, all of this needs to translate into lifelong, modular, flexible learning opportunities for students that help scaffold them on the pathway. And we should all be lifelong learners and students along the pathway to the career that they need to the career that their companies need, and the career that they want. So we launched this in California with the Los Angeles Unified School District and Santa Monica College, both focusing in on majority minority students, largely Hispanic in the Los Angeles community. Great success in the first launch. They used the cloud career pathways to align to their objectives. We provide instructional design, professional development, AWS inside the classroom. And then they launched a 4-course sequence around cloud called a cloud computing certificate. In the first day, 35 students enrolled in the first cohort, filled it. They opened another cohort, filled in a day or two. They couldn't enroll anymore because they didn't have any more people to teach these courses. Mission and Annika, 2 partners of ours, provided review of curriculum, provide classroom, guest speaking, and even launched apprenticeships and internships around it. The success of that led to 19 colleges and their sister high school joining this California Cloud Workforce Project, and now over 850 students just 1 year later are enrolled in this cloud computing certificate. Expanded last year into our Cloud Associate degree, launched at Northern Virginia Community College, the first 2-year degree offering in cloud computing with us. Enrollment has already tripled there over the year. We're really excited about where that program has gone. Miami-Dade and Columbus State Community College launched their own associate degree along with Ivy Tech and other institutions. And now we've gone statewide. The entire New York CUNY and SUNY system is going to do a cloud computing certificate. And just last month, the Louisiana governor said that across Louisiana, from the urban centers of New Orleans and Baton Rouge to rural communities in the state, we are going to offer cloud computing throughout all of our community and technical college system, along with a pathway into 4-year degrees at the University of Louisiana State System. Like yesterday, we announced an extension of the cloud degree program into bachelor's. GMU is going to be doing that in partnership with Nova. We're super excited about that added incremental offering. All of that curriculum is shareable. And we also announced that we're going international by the UK, their career college system, going this way. We're going to continue to progress. We have crazy demand for this type of stuff because there is a giant skills gap. All right, I wanted to turn it over to Jeff.
So Jeff, it's lovely having you here today. We were talking about how Amazon filled the gap, but you've built an amazing program at the College Board, which is a great segue of education. And as we think about it, College Board is a nonprofit, it's public sector, and we just said there's a large skill gap. How do we think about competing in that commercial sector for these people who we know we need? What really is your strategy for this?
Yeah. Well, I imagine most of the folks who are here today, or if you're watching later online, you're an employer, you're a manager, you're of technical talent, right, of various types. And for anyone in the public sector, of course, there's a natural anxiety because the public sector competes with the private sector for talent, right? And whether you're in the public sector and you're in national security or defense, or if you're working for an NGO that is mission-based, or if you're producing responsive government, or if you're in the education space, as we are, you're competing for talent with the private sector. And you can imagine, hypothetically, what if there was an organization that was dropping like 25,000 new jobs right in your backyard? Just hypothetically.
Hypothetically,
yeah.
Of course.
And we can't be bleeding talent, right? So every public sector organization needs to have some sort of strategy in that way because our mission depends on our technical excellence. And so the good news is that there are technologists who, for part of their career or for all of their career, they want to do something for a while that is about something other than shareholder value, right? And like, for example, I know, Elizabeth, in your career, you've done some nonprofit public sector time and some private sector time, as have I. And the College Board, we're an education organization. For those who don't know, we were founded in 1900 by the Ivy Leagues to essentially make access to higher education more equitable, and not just about people who went to expensive private high schools. But since that time, we have a wider mission. We started the Advanced Placement Program. Something that we've done just in the past few years is we created something called AP Computer Science Principles. The objective of that course is to diversify software engineering as a profession, specifically along the lines of gender, and it's off to a fantastic start. We partner with the National Science Foundation, with the National Math and Science Initiative, with Code.org, with others, and so we're really focused on this sort of computer science education, STEM education, globally, right, but certainly in the United States. Why not also focus on it internally and have that be our strategy to compete for talent, which is to focus on education? So we feel like it's a natural extension.
So as you just said, College Board isn't new.
Yeah.
We're going over 100 years back. We have plenty of people probably who also are from legacy organizations. They're not the latest and greatest startup.
Yeah.
So why the big emphasis on technology now? Is that a really big change because of the cloud?
Yeah, so the first is we have some ambitions. We want to do new things, and you hear people talk about monolithic architectures. We have a monolithic architecture, and I'm going to borrow that clicker from you. Thank you. Where's the button? Just the screen one here.
Okay.
And so we have an ambition to drastically improve the experience of students and educators. I like to say, like, applying to college in the US is like buying a house without a real estate agent. It's really complicated. And so we're doing a bunch of things to try to simplify it for everyone involved in the process, and working with others to do so. So because we have that ambition, there's a lot of things that we want to do, but having a monolithic architecture, not great for that, right? It makes it so that if you improve one thing, you might break 7 other things, right? That's how it goes.
Nobody in here has ever done that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So you know how when someone's coming over to your house, like you kind of want to tidy up a little bit before they come over, you feel a little sense of embarrassment about it? Well, I'm going to invite you into the way our house was looking before we got started with this. And we really started this work back in 2016. But I'm going to invite you in and just show you a little bit about our context of why learning is so important. So I'm going to show a little video and narrate it. So what's our critical need? So we have a monolith. There's an actual picture of our monolith. It's expensive to operate. It slows us down. It's hard to maintain. We spend a lot of time patching it. Now, what we've really decided to do is go way past containers, straight to serverless, and we were delighted by this paper published by Berkeley Computer Science back in February. 10 years ago, these same folks predicted the future of cloud computing, and their predictions were prescient. Maybe they even influenced Amazon and others, who knows? But in any case, they argue now today that serverless computing is essentially going to replace the client-server paradigm, and they say it's an evolution that parallels the transition from assembly language to high-level programming language, so a pretty big one, and that over the coming years it'll continue to evolve. So what does that imply? So our old architecture had many, many layers. You've all heard the term spaghetti code. This is rather like lasagna code. And having talked to many of you at other organizations, this is what it looks like. You got UI, IAM, you got an MVC framework, middleware, ETL, storage, database, server OS, virtualization, and then at the bottom, actual physical hardware, right? In the new architecture, it's rather radical, because what you end up with is UI, backend as a service, and then such serverless microservices as you need. So all of those lasagna code layers end up getting captured into backend as a service. Look at the simplicity, the staggering simplicity of it. So many fewer lines of code, right? Now for us, there's an implication of this, which is with all the learning that we need to do, why not learn one language? ECMAScript 6, okay? ES6, Node, and React, that's what we're gonna be focused on learning, right? We're not saying JavaScript is, the preferred language platform for everything anyone's gonna do, but for us, as kind of a learning challenge, it allows us to write our Lambdas in Node, and then also interact with all of our backend as a service directly from JavaScript in the client.
Simplicity is beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're talking about technologists, and Ken brought this up, we're constantly learning at the speed of which Amazon is putting things out. Even internally, we will admit, there's a lot to keep up with. We're learning just as fast as our customers and partners are. And how do you keep your teams moving forward, learning all this stuff? Is it exhausting? Are we wearing people out?
Yeah, well, you guys are definitely constantly announcing and evolving. It's rather staggering the amount of just capital that's going into cloud engineering across Amazon and others in human history. Like the amount of capital going into this software engineering is nuts. But I would say that while it could be daunting, this amount of change, it's the reality of all of our careers from now on as technologists, right? Things are going to keep on changing. And so what we're trying to do is kind of embrace a posture of learning first, learning as a philosophy for the rest of our careers. And for every one person who finds it daunting, we feel like there's 10 people who find it actually exhilarating. And I've said to you before, like technologists are kind of like athletes. They're kind of most comfortable when they're being slightly stretched and forced to grow. And that if you think back to your own career, probably the points of greatest satisfaction are those points where you're feeling stretched. And so we're explicitly making the connection between learning and challenge and retention, right? However, it also means that people who've had a career on a technology that we're frankly going away from have the opportunity to learn in this new area. So I'm going to show you a little video, and I'm going to press next to do that, about our learning culture. And I just, rather than telling you about what it's like, I wanted to kind of show you what we are working on.
We're building an organization that embraces learning.
We're going serverless, but we're also going beyond serverless. That creates learning challenges.
We're removing so many layers from hardware
To virtualization,
to operating system,
to middleware, to database,
to web application framework. We are systematically eliminating those layers from our architecture. We call our approach the North Stars.
And yes, we know there is only one North Star.
we're transforming our monolith into microservices.
From an emphasis on Java to full-stack JavaScript.
From ETL to event-based streaming.
From big relational databases to database as a service.
From monthly enterprise deployments to continuous deployment.
From business logic to machine learning.
For us, the client-server era is over.
The pace of technology change isn't going to slow down.
But that means we have a lot to learn.
So those were the voices of some of the folks on our team.
And I'd love quickly to make a call out. Did anybody notice that there was lots of different people in that video? Because I think that's really exciting, is that we are expanding a traditional workforce to be an inclusive workforce. So I congratulate you on, I know, a very concerted effort to move that forward. And I think at Amazon, especially with the involvement of WePowerTech, we're really looking to make sure that everybody is inclusive and everybody is invited into this new world. Yeah. But we're doing a lot of learning here. We're talking about learning, but somebody has to teach all of us this. We love to think about being a learner, but in the end, somebody's got to come. And I think Ken said, we're not in it alone. We find partners. Did you have to find a partner? How are you continuing this? And who's the teachers?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, you guys have been good partners to us in learning. We've done a lot directly with Amazon to create learning opportunities for our staff. Beyond that, we have reached out some to other partners that are part of the AWS partner ecosystem. And I'll talk about A Cloud Guru, for example. But our big, I think, insight is that much of the teaching comes from our own engineers. And so by sort of creating this culture of developer empowerment, it's not just about continuous learning, it's also about continuous teaching. So we're an education organization, we're educating ourselves. And I think there's some folks here from our organization, like, I'll just say, if you're here from College Board, if you have taught your fellow technologists at College Board, raise your hand. Yeah, so it's a lot of folks, and I would say there are hundreds actually, and there's not that many people here, but I'd like to show you just a little overview of that. So we've created this sort of teaching culture where developers have a voice to educate one another. And we started with wanting to do this because of Conway's Law. Conway's Law often comes up because it creates monoliths, and can create problematic architectures, but there's also a virtuous Conway's Law, which is to say the people are the technology. The way that people communicate is directly reflected in the technology they build. So that's Conway's Law that you guys know from 1968, but everybody still lives it today who makes systems. Now, A Cloud Guru. We actually have our A Cloud Guru in-house professor here with us today, but we've created a class that meets on a syllabus, on a schedule, and that helps people to get through it. We've also partnered with React Training, so we have actual committers from the React project who come and teach their classes in the Washington area directly in our office. We've also embraced large hackathons with coaching in 2017 for AWS, in 2018, essentially for backend as a service. In 2019, for React, we call it the Reackening. And they're successively building on one another, but it's all about teams teaching each other. And here are the movie posters that we make for each person for each team that has taught other teams, and they hang it up in their offices or in their areas. And again, it gets back to Conway's Law. The way we communicate becomes reflected in the technology that we build.
As somebody who teaches communication among IT here, I think it's fantastic. But we saw that was a great positive way of reinforcing it. We're recognizing people in fun ways. We're doing it with great themes. But again, being a nonprofit public sector entity, how are you incentivizing your staff? What kind of keeps that going besides handing out cash bonuses?
Yeah, well, one of the nice things about being a nonprofit is we don't have to deliver back shareholder value. So we actually compensate staff pretty competitively with the private sector. And we're pretty generous about education. So staff have the ability to attend conferences, but also to pursue training courses and be reimbursed for that. They can get a graduate degree and be reimbursed for that. On top of that, we even contribute to, if people have kids, we even contribute to the college tuition of their kids. Awesome. So that's something that, we're fortunate that we don't have a high turnover rate because we are pretty generous with our staff. But particularly in an environment that's increasingly competitive, we need to find ways beyond education and opportunity to compete, and those are some of them.
Can I, so what, in your experience, what has been the most impactful teaching, both in terms of what they like, as well as, is it modular, is it person to person, is it, something that results in a degree or a certification, both in terms of what they want, and also what drives the most impact?
Yeah, so, the thing about things like even degrees and certifications is that, obviously we're the College Board. We deeply value the importance of higher education for its civic benefits, for its professional and career benefits, for cultural benefits, and so on. Having said that, degree programs and certifications are themselves somewhat ponderous in the modern era when technology is changing so fast. So in fact, by having curious people in a developer-empowered culture, people who are constantly learning new things themselves, right? Then they're also motivated to teach it to others, right? That might sound chaotic. It's not chaotic, and we do curate it. We also coach technologists to develop them as teachers of others, right? But I would say it's hard to say what is most impactful, but it's that peer-to-peer, non-hierarchical education that makes the biggest difference. And the number one thing is none of it has been required. None of it is in anybody's goals. It's all things that people opt into.
So there was, I took a course on gamification a while back, and there's like the points and this and that, the direct gaming, elements, even credentials. They're worthwhile, but the bigger stuff is the intangible thing. And I think, for us, for Amazonians, I think being innovators and knowing that the services and can do cool things, I think is one of the best rewards of being taught something, as opposed to some of those standard points, even credentials. That speaks to that. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And also, if we think about adult learning styles, you need to be inclusive of who's an audio learner, visual learner, hands-on learner, and being comprehensive in the models really addresses all of that. And everybody's learning. You just said they're empowered. So what are some cool stories? What's coming out of this? What are they making?
Okay, so I'm going to plug a session that's happening later today at 1:30. We talked about serverlessness and backend as a service, embracing microservices. Greenfield projects are really fun, right? Because you don't have to deal with all of the legacy. We built a project last year, which we call College Board Opportunity Scholarships. And we have pledged $25 million in scholarships over the next 5 years. But unlike scholarships that are about what sort of talent you have, talented athlete, talented musician, talented student, this one is more about the sweat equity that you put in. So it's about what you do. So you qualify for this scholarship just by doing the things that you need to do to navigate that path forward in your education to college. And we built that application entirely serverless, entirely on AWS, entirely serverless, and entirely backend as a service. We even economized the number of microservices that we needed to build down to 12 because we made such extensive use of backend as a service. And it's a big application, and we built it in 6 months because of that elegance of architecture. And we're going to be talking about that at 1:30 today. And so I suggest everybody check it out.
We have a similar thing among our team. So we're integrating. A piece of the work that we do integrates with sort of a legacy product. The dev team can't wait to move off of that. The opportunity to develop, using all their powers to develop in green space is a teaching opportunity in and of itself. Another thing that Teresa Carlson has mentioned to me, and this is especially applicable for women, but it may be a full-scale thing across diversity and inclusion, is working on things that are greater than us, are social, of social or deep benefit. Again, things that help attract, retain, but also encourage innovators and builders and people discovering and learning on themselves.
And so I think about this, we're talking about learning, we're talking about doing cool things. How has this impacted your employee satisfaction? We're here to talk about how do we retain our staff. So what is College Board looking at when you think about employee satisfaction?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, we look at our retention, our ability to attract new talent, and those are going great. We do have a measure, which is every year we measure our staff engagement. It's done for us by the Gallup organization. And when we started this program, among other good things happening, we saw a year-over-year improvement of the organizational engagement within the technology organization of 9 percentage points in a single year, which out of 100 is like a really big year-over-year change, and typically you might see just 1 or 2 points change per year. And so we think that reflects a developer-empowered culture.
That's amazing. We have a little time left. If we have any questions from the audience, I think we've had some really interesting conversation, but do you have questions of either Amazon or the College Board and how we're thinking about keeping people employed at our nonprofit public sector organizations? See one in the back.
I'd be interested to know, at College Board, how you empowered your staff to do training when that might not be their natural skill set. And then how did you help them do the movie type banners and posters?
Yeah. So, well, we help them with movie type posters and banners. We have our chief architect actually also moonlights a little bit as a poster designer. So that's how we do that. But your question gets at something critical, which is fear, right? Which is the fear associated with an organization changing the underlying technologies that it works on, right? And it's a totally legitimate fear. We all need a job, right? And so when we begin talking about changing the underlying technology, well, I've built my whole career around Yoyodyne's technology stack. I'm a Yoyodyne certified engineer, right? But but we've had to say to people again and again, and I think it's a mantra now, like, you're not, take it away, you're not an Oracle certified software engineer. You're a software engineer, right? And you can't get married to one specific technology. And so that repeated over time, I think, has provided the reassurance. The other thing is the hackathon part of it. I mean, hackathons are a bit fashionable, right? And they're cool. I was a judge at the Hackathon for Good that you guys hosted on Monday night. But the benefit of hackathons to us was to provide a safe space for risk-taking, and also to kind of pivot the culture to say there's no shame in being new to something, right? It's totally fine to be new at something. And in fact, we're all going to be new at things for the rest of our careers. So I think that's kind of the pivot, but with explicit messaging about reassurance.
Yeah, we're way up in the front.
I have a question on how are AWS reaching out to the HBCU
to the
campuses?
HBCU, we've actually we are talking with various HBCUs now about how we can help them go into deeper degree paths and opportunities around education. I've got to meet with a number of HBCU presidents recently, and we want to do whatever we can to help that. We both value and understand the importance of bringing in deeper inclusion to all of our staffs. I was actually listening to Andy Jassy talk on Recode. So he was interviewed by Kara Swisher yesterday. I think it's minute 35
That's
of
a little
that
scary.
interview.
Yeah,
that may be a little scary, but it's a great interview. And I think he talks about Amazon and diversity and inclusion, both from a female perspective, but then from an African American perspective. And so I would kind of pivot. You say, check out that video. It's really impactful into the way he's thinking about it. I think is something that we all share.
And I think we're moving to democratizing education. I mean, we're adding programs, but we announced at re:Event, we have hundreds of free digital learning out there for anybody and everybody. So it's not necessarily that we're trying to get to a place of cost, and we're trying to democratize, be it in the educational setting or at an individual level.
No, absolutely. there are lots of, AWS Educate's free for all students. And the digital subscription program offers these great free offerings. Absolutely. I think though, one of Amazon's premier earns trust, includes in that vocally self-critical. And I think we've all got to look inwardly at our companies and look at the people around us and understand, are we truly diversifying? I think the answer is we're making gains, we're excited about it, and we have a long ways to go.
Absolutely. Towards the middle, grab a mic. Get a mic. For the recording, she'll have a mic. Just a moment.
I come from a state agency, and for the past 20 years, we've held a certain platform. Thank you. That's very slow moving. So our operations folks have a tendency to, every 2 or 3 or 4 years, they've got to go to a class and learn the 2 or 3 nuances on it. And we're moving into AWS, and one of the pushbacks I'm getting currently is, like this last application, it's a really new application for us, has 14 different services or microservices that are being attached to it in from AWS. And one of the pushbacks is they don't feel like there's some sort of certification program that they can go get to for application load balancer, which it's a set it and forget it type of thing, at least in my book it is. But our operations and even the managers are really giving a lot of pushback on how could we support something that we don't know how to do, and there's only a document in AWS that covers it. How do you approach that kind of mentality or that culture to get them to move to that fast and furious, do it your damn self learning deal versus the old way? I hope that's a question.
I'm letting you have this one.
So, you can go first. I'll go second.
If you wouldn't mind a little bit of provocation, our philosophy that we've adopted for ourselves, we're also slow-moving, historically slow-moving and old applications that we built decades ago and have been maintaining. We're still maintaining a number of them, but we're working to re-architect them. I could feel the pain, as you were describing it, and we too had a distinction between people who develop platforms and people who operate the platforms. And DevOps is a buzzword. I get that, but it springs from a very basic insight about moral hazard, which is if the people who are developing the thing do not also operate it, if the people who are operating the thing do not also develop it, it creates moral hazard. And it's a tough culture to change from, and it takes time and iteration and trust and all that. But we had a big moment earlier this year where we dissolved the group that did technical operations to the individual development teams, and it was our moment that we called TechOps to DevOps, and not without some pain and learning certainly, but a proud moment for us on the technical operations side and on the development side, because we bring that operational expertise into the development team, and we just are one team now for the application. That is a hard thing to get to, and it took years, right? And then we're still going to have to deal with things as we progress with it. But I think that the fundamental answer to the question is DevOps.
One thing that so we released 3 badges yesterday, again, for the educational audience, but one in Sumerian, Deep Racer, and RoboMaker yesterday. And the Lambda team reached out to me and said, can we do a serverless badge? And we've generally done them by service lines in our badges, and we have these pathways that go to careers, and I'm like, yeah, we absolutely should, and we've got to also scaffold these. the purpose of that is we don't have all of these things right at all. We know there's a giant skill gap. We know that there's different companies of varying knowledge that we've got to provide resources to. And we really need heavy feedback on other things that we should be offering. How do we make things modular? Do you need things free? Are there things that you're willing to pay for? So on and so forth. We've got to be able to meet you guys all where you are. As we always say, I think we're at day one and we want your feedback. I ask the same of you, like, what do you think from AWS's perspective? What are we doing? What should we be doing better from an overall providing learning perspective?
Well, I think you can't do everything, right? Because I think in part, a challenge that you're going to have is because you're continually iterating on services, like canonizing a set of educational content associated with those services is pretty challenging. Maybe there's a dev-educate model for AWS, which is kind of our model, I guess I would say, where there's a path for keeping the education and training super current because it's somehow the team itself is invested in it. But I think that you're always going to have that challenge as long as you continue to put so much capital into so much innovation.
So I want to thank Ken and Jeff for being with us today and telling their stories of their organizations. My call to action for everyone is think about what you are doing and how you can build this culture of learning and continual learning into your organization. We have resources, we're willing to help, we want feedback on how we can help you more. But thank you for joining us today. Have a lovely day and enjoy the rest of your sessions.